Hank's story emphasizes the importance of family and the connection between generations. Will Hank's letters and will make his children realize the reminder of the core values he taught them? Let us know where you're watching from. Now, relax and enjoy this amazing story. The morning sun filtered through the dense conifers surrounding Lake Oswego, a small town nestled in Portland. On the edge of Oswego Lake, a modest log cabin stood as a silent sentinel. Its owner, Hank Anderson, a 75-year-old man with broad shoulders and calloused hands, watched the sunrise reflected in the placid waters. Hank adjusted his hearing aid, a nearly unconscious gesture after so many years. The sounds of nature, the bird songs, the rustling leaves, the lapping of waves on the shore, reached him as muffled whispers, memories of a symphony he could no longer fully appreciate. He vividly remembered the day everything changed. Hank, then 50 years old, was at the peak of his career, respected for his skill and work ethic. The familiar sound of the chainsaw buzzed in his ears, when suddenly a sharp crack cut through the air. A massive branch, hidden in the dense foliage, broke loose without warning. In the blink of an eye, Hank found himself on the ground, dazed and disoriented. The pain came later. The world around him had turned into a mute void, punctuated only by a high-pitched and relentless ringing. Back in the present, Hank entered his cabin. Sitting in his worn armchair, Hank picked up a crumpled letter from the side table. It was the invitation to his granddaughter's 5th birthday party, Kevin's daughter, to be held next month in San Francisco. He wanted so much to go, to see the family gathered, to hug the little granddaughter. But the prospect of feeling like a stranger, a burden amid the bustle of a children's party, made his heart ache. Thousands of miles from Lake Oswego, in 3 of America's cities, Hank's children lived their busy lives, each chasing their own version of the American dream. In San Francisco, Kevin Anderson, 45, admired the panoramic view of the harbor from his office on the 30th floor. As the CEO of a rising tech company, he embodied the entrepreneurial spirit of the American West Coast. His impeccable Italian suit and Apple Watch were a stark contrast to childhood memories. Days spent fishing with his father at Oswego Lake, wearing faded overalls and muddy boots. Meanwhile, in Las Vegas, Dr. Isela Anderson, 42, rushed through the white, sterile hallways of Sunrise Hospital. As a renowned cardiac surgeon, her days were a marathon of consultations, surgeries, and rounds. During a rare break, Clementine found herself looking at a photo on her cell phone. Her and her father, decades ago, building a giant snowman. She smiled at the memory, but the smile quickly faded. The last time she saw Hank, at Christmas last year, had been uncomfortable. The difficulty in communication, the frustration on both sides, had left a bitter taste. In Philadelphia, Felix Anderson, 38, the youngest of the family, stood in front of a classroom at Pennsylvania University as a professor of American literature. He devoted his life to exploring the narratives that shaped his country's identity. So, ironically, his own family story seemed increasingly distant. After class, as students left, Felix found himself thinking about his father Hank's passion for storytelling by the fireplace, narrating First Nations legends and tales of brave lumberjacks. These had been the seed of his academic career, but now those stories were silenced, trapped behind a barrier of mutual misunderstanding. Felix's phone buzzed. It was a message from Kevin. Christine's birthday next month. Felix hesitated, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. The prospect of a family reunion made him anxious. The last interactions with his father had been tense, marked by uncomfortable silences and frustrating attempts at communication. As the day wore on, the 3 Anderson siblings, separated by provinces and time zones, found themselves united by a common dilemma: how to deal with a father who, in their eyes, was becoming increasingly distant and difficult. Finally, on a cold autumn night, the 3 gathered for a video call, Kevin, in his home office overlooking the twinkling lights of San Francisco. Clementine, exhausted after a long day of surgeries, wrapped in a blanket in her Las Vegas apartment, and Felix, surrounded by piles of books in his cozy studio in Philadelphia. The conversation flowed, filled with shared memories and unspoken concerns. They recalled summers spent swimming at Oswego Lake, cozy winter nights with hot chocolate, and ghost stories. But those sweet memories were tempered by the present reality. A father struggling to communicate, impatient children frustrated with his slowness, and the growing chasm between their urban lives and Hank's rural roots. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in Lake Oswego, Hank Anderson fell asleep in his armchair, the birthday invitation still in his calloused hands, dreaming of days gone by and quietly hoping for a future where he could reconnect with his children. The morning after the disastrous dinner dawned gray in Lake Oswego, the sky heavy with clouds that promised the first snowfall of the autumn. Hank Anderson woke up in his chair, his neck stiff and his eyes tired. The invitation to Christine's birthday lay on the floor, having slipped from his hands during the night. After a simple breakfast, Hank decided to take a walk through town. Hank's last stop was the local lawyer's office, a small red brick building on the corner of Main Street. Hank spent the next hour discussing changes to his will. His intentions were clear. Most of his estate would be donated to local charities and the community that had supported him for so many years. For his children, he reserved small monetary gifts and, more importantly, personal letters that he still needed to write. Interactions with his children, however, remained sparse and strained. Kevin, always busy with his business in San Francisco, sent brief, impersonal texts. "Hi, Dad. How's everything there? Is the winter harsh? Take care." Hank, still uncomfortable with modern technology, responded as simply as possible. "Yes, son. All is well. Thank you." Clementine, on the other hand, tried to maintain more regular contact. Her weekly video calls, though well-intentioned, often left Hank frustrated. The unstable internet connection in Lake Oswego. "Dad, are you remembering to take your meds?" Clementine asked, her voice distorted. "Yes, dear. Don't worry." Felix, the youngest, surprised Hank with a handwritten letter in the middle of winter. The gesture, as old-fashioned as it was, brought tears to the old lumberjack's eyes. Felix spoke about his students, a book he was writing on First Nations legends, and expressed a desire to visit in the spring. Hank read and reread the letter several times, feeling a mix of pride and melancholy. He took out a pen and paper, determined to reply, but the words did not come easily. How to express years of unspoken feelings, how to bridge the chasm that time and distance had created. Spring arrived in Lake Oswego with its usual mix of gentle rain and green shoots breaking through the melted snow. Oswego Lake, free of its ice mantle, once again reflected the sky on its calm surface. It was on one of these tranquil mornings that Anderson departed this world, as quietly as he had lived his final years. Destiny, the owner of the general store, was the one who found him. Concerned by his absence from his usual morning walk, she went to the cabin by the lake. Hank was in his favorite armchair, a book open on his lap, and a serene smile on his wrinkled face. It seemed he had simply fallen asleep, leaving this world without fanfare or suffering. The funeral was held outdoors, near the lake that Hank had so loved. Hank's children watched, a mixture of emotions on their faces. Kevin, always the most composed, maintained a stoic expression, though his eyes betrayed his pain. Clementine struggled against tears, clutching Felix's hand. When it came time for eulogies, the siblings glanced at each other, none feeling prepared to speak. It was Destiny, the owner of the general store, who stood up to share memories of Hank. She spoke of his kindness, his resilience after losing his hearing, and how he had never ceased to be a pillar of the community. After the ceremony, the Anderson siblings were summoned to the lawyer's office for the reading of the will. The office was small and cozy, with cedar-paneled walls and a large window overlooking the lake. The lawyer, Mr. Clark, a middle-aged man with thin-rimmed glasses, greeted them with a firm handshake and a compassionate gaze. "Before we begin, your father left specific instructions for you to read these letters first." He handed each sibling a sealed envelope. With trembling hands, Kevin, Clementine, and Felix opened their respective letters. Their father's careful handwriting filled the pages, words he had never been able to say aloud, now immortalized on paper. Each letter ended with an apology for the distance that had developed between them, and an expression of unconditional love that transcended the barriers of silence and misunderstanding. As they finished reading, the three siblings were in tears, years of repressed emotions finally finding an outlet. Mr. Clark gave them a moment to compose themselves before proceeding with the official reading of the will. When he began, the siblings were caught off guard. "I am Hank Anderson, being of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament. To my children, Kevin, Clementine, and Felix, I leave a small sum of money, detailed in the attached documents. The remainder of my estate and belongings, including my cabin and adjacent lands, will be donated to establish a foundation dedicated to preserving the forests of Lake Oswego and supporting educational programs about conservation and indigenous culture." The surprise was evident on the Anderson siblings' faces. Kevin was the first to speak. "But the cabin, the land, it must be worth a fortune." The lawyer nodded. "Your father had recent appraisals done. The total value of the properties and investments is considerable." Clementine, still processing the news, asked, "And all of this is going to the foundation?" Yes. Hank was very clear in his instructions. He wanted his legacy to benefit the community and the land he loved so much. Felix, who had been silent until now, spoke softly. This sounds exactly like Dad." The remainder of the will detailed the plans for the foundation, including scholarships for local youth, reforestation programs, and cultural preservation initiatives. When Mr. Clark finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. The Anderson siblings found themselves confronted not only with the loss of their father, but with the realization of how little they had known him in the later years of his life. Kevin, always the businessman, was the first to recover from the shock. "Well, it seems the old man pulled one last trick on us." Clementine shot him a reproachful look. "Kevin, this isn't the time for—" But she was interrupted by an unexpected sound. Felix was laughing. It started as a quiet chuckle and soon turned into a contagious laugh. "Can't you see? Even in the end, Dad was trying to teach us a lesson about what really matters." That night, in 3 different corners of the vast American landscape, the Anderson siblings looked up at the same starry sky. Each, in their own way, was beginning to unravel their father's true legacy. It wasn't about properties or bank accounts, but about connections, with the land, with people, and with their own roots. Hank's unspoken words now echoed loudly and clearly, transcending the silence that had long separated them. And in the expanse of America, a country built on stories of perseverance, adaptation, and community, Hank Anderson's children were finally finding their way back home. If you were Hank, would you dedicate your wealth to community service by leaving most of your assets for charitable activities? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, give it a like and share it with others. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more inspiring stories. Goodbye, and see you soon.